Welcome to the Freebirth podcast, a supportive space for people who are learning, exploring, and celebrating their autonomous choices in childbirth. Together, we'll unpack truths, share personal stories, and claim our ability to birth freely and intuitively. Here's your host, Emily Saldea.
Today we have first-time mom Rachel, whose minimalist approach to life I found quite inspiring. She tells the beautiful story of her off-the-grid free birth, and we have an important discussion on vaginal tearing and the cultural implications behind it.
I remember as a teenager and just a young person, my only thoughts around birth really were fearful. And I remember my mom's birth story. She birthed in the hospital naturally, but with some interventions. But just the part about her hemorrhaging and having all the blood, it just was the part that stood out to me so much. So I always had this sort of fear around it. And I think I did want to have kids someday, but mostly that fear is what stood out to me, and I didn't think about it a whole lot more than that. But fast forward to, I think it was about 2.5 years ago, I was invited to attend my first birth, and that's actually the only birth I've attended besides my own. And my friend Senna was having her third baby, and they called me up at 5 a.m, and I came over, and she was just laying on the couch, and it was just her and Melissa and I was rubbing her feet, and it was really casual and just such a casual thing, and then all of a sudden she got up on her knees and kneeled on the couch and birthed her baby, and she did have a midwife come over, but it was honestly the most easy birth I've ever witnessed. Well, the only birth, but it just
a
gave
great
me a good
starter.
flavor.
Yeah,
Totally. I'm like, wow, what an awesome, easy birth. That's what it can be like. Okay. So that was in my mind. And then really just having animals, having goats and watching them birth every year. And that kind of gave me a flavor of okay, birth is a pretty easy thing. That's something that happens in nature all the time without complications. It's just how it goes. And
I had lived with this Teepee community, this Teepee village, before actually meeting my partner, and had lived with a couple of really dear friends there who are mothers, and they birthed their children in teepees out in the forest and just did it naturally, raised their kids up that way, do elimination, communication, all these things that I hadn't really experienced before, but just living with them, it was so normal and really opened up a whole new world for me of what's possible. So I had that in mind, and also had in mind that I really wanted to have a family and be a mother and step into that world. And then this was about a year after that birth that I told you about. I met my partner at a skills gathering up in Oregon, and it turns out that he had also lived with that Teepee village several years before, so we had this common foundation, and yeah, we just connected there and pretty much knew right away that we had similar goals in life and aspirations, and the biggest one really was having a family. So without much ado, we just kind of did that in the next few months, and we're living, we pretty much always lived off the grid and just had a pretty simple life. And we got pregnant together around that total solar eclipse last year in August.
Yeah. Cool.
Just, I think within a week before that. So I didn't know at the time, but pretty soon after I knew, I had gone down to Mount Shasta for a women's vision quest ceremony and started having to pee all the time.
Yeah.
It's so strange to me. Even when I was fasting from water for a day, I just had to keep getting up peeing. So when I came home and I missed my moon, I kind of knew right away, oh, okay, I'm pregnant. And I told him, and I didn't tell anybody else, so for several months, and just kind of like felt into it and noticed the changes and everything going on with my body. And I never really felt like taking a pregnancy test or anything like that. Just kind of minimalist, really. I think that's how I do most things. Like, I don't feel the need to see a doctor or anything really, or a dentist, except emergencies, of course. But
Sure.
Anyway, yeah, around
I don't
the
meet many
third.
I don't meet many women who don't take the pregnancy test. That's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just knew that I was pregnant.
Right.
So the place where the doubt did come in is, okay, like, is this gonna last?
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? So I was kind of open to that, seeing, like, is this gonna be a child? Or is this gonna be maybe a pregnancy that doesn't end in a child? I didn't know, so I was kind of open to that and just curious about it. And yeah, around the third month, we were again living with that Teepee community. We hadn't been together, like, it was just me and him out in the woods in Southern Oregon, and we had kind of reunited with this group, and it was a really awesome village down there close to Mount Shasta. 7 kids running around and 3 other families, and we're all in our yurts and teepees. It was really great, and just living out there on the land with a spring and our goats and stuff. And so I was with these 2 women who had both recently birthed their children. I think their oldest were like a year and a half, and they had free birth, so they were, of course, really supportive of me. And those are the first people that I really let know that I was pregnant. And at the time, we had planned to just be with them. You know, we set up our little Mongolian yurt there and made a nest, and we're thinking that that's where our baby would be born. So they were really supportive of us, but I also wasn't sure that I wanted to do it on my own the first time. There was just a lot that I didn't know, and so I was looking into midwives. I didn't really get too serious about it, and I actually talked to a friend who was apprenticing with midwives, and told her that I was thinking about doing unassisted birth. And that's what I was calling it then. And then she kind of was like asking me if it was because of financial reasons and stuff. And I don't know, for whatever reason, that kind of made me feel funny. And the truth is, like, financially, we couldn't afford a midwife at all. And if I wanted to do any kind of birth like that, I would have had to do a lot of financial, like, loopholes and things like that, which just isn't very appealing to me, and I'm not good at it at all. So just, like, the simplest thing to do really was to not go down that path at all.
Well, and so how did your birth story with the fear that your mom, had planted in you around the bleeding out, and how that had kind of colored some relationship to birth previous to this? How did that, like, pair with kind of one of the most radical ways of giving birth, like out off the grid by yourself, not even in a house or whatever?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was an initial fear, but the truth is that once I started reading other people's birth stories, and I think even just meeting my friends that were living there in the village who had birthed, it really just overshadowed that with the positive light. Like, okay, birth is actually normal. It's pretty unlikely. And then just asking my mom, too, to hear more about my birth story and about the different interventions that she had, and how quite likely she would have had a really easy home birth had she not had those different things happening to her. Yeah, it made me feel confident. And so really I just started reading more and more and researching, and I kind of, like, when I get a new interest in my life, be it astrology or any other thing, I just go, like, way into it, and that's all I can think about and talk about. And so that was birth for me. And specifically, like, home birth and unassisted birth, but also learning about the different things that they do in the hospital, because I really had no idea that it was like that. Never been to a hospital birth before. But yeah, just the researching, and I found a flyer down at the local library for a birth class that was happening in town, and it was taught by a local doula. And so my partner and I signed up for that, and he was actually hesitant to that because from the get-go, he's like, okay, reproduction is a thing that humans know how to do. What more do you need to know?
Nice.
He's pretty like minimalist. He's like, okay, you can do it. And he's actually throughout the whole thing has, he's never like discouraged me from researching, and he wanted to learn basic things, but he kind of wanted to stop me from getting too heady about it and to, just filling my head up way too much with things that I didn't really need to know. I mean, really, just my body knows, and I needed to trust it. But
and if you're able,
he's that balance for me.
Totally. And I think for a lot of women, they have to, or they choose to over intellectualize and even over medicalize their own free births first to kind of find their way to that. And so what I am hearing about your story that's so cool is like you really didn't have to over intellectualize this biological design, that you were, and your partner very much so, were very comfortable in the reality of the biology without having to read every book and prepare for every emergency and make it super heady, which, that's one of the most freeing parts of letting physiological birth unfold, is that it just will.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's true. I mean, I did over intellectualize it though. And it did give me some comfort though, just to feel like I understood it in my mind of what was going to happen, the hormones, how they work, and what could possibly happen and what I could do for that. But anyway, we took this class, and it was just us and two other couples. It was really sweet, and they were all home birthing as well and did like water births. And just being there, it was only a couple of sessions spaced out over a few weeks, but through the process of just like speaking in front of other people that I didn't know that well, my plans to birth without any medical assistance, without any doctor's visits or anything like that, it gave me a lot of confidence because I had sort of been living in a bubble really of just people who live a lot like me, and I hadn't had to interact that much with the outside world as far as like telling them my intimate things like that, which to me, everything about birth is pretty intimate to talk about with other people. So I just, through the course of that, had the confidence that I needed to know, like, yeah, I am making the right decision. Actually, I don't want to have a midwife as a backup, and I don't need to hire anybody that I don't know that well to be at my birth or anything like that. The one kind of wrench in our whole plans, though, was that we were living on this 1,000-acre property that was really awesome, and I think I was about 5 months pregnant and it was winter. It was like January, I think, right before that lunar eclipse, when the landowner, who was like totally absentee, just suddenly vacated all of us off of the land.
Oh, no.
And we were like so we were a tight community, all of us, the 4 families, and we got to stay together for a couple of weeks, but then we all dispersed different places, and it was pretty heartbreaking to just think that I had some stability and then not. So really that was like what was occupying my mind and my concerns throughout the pregnancy, not so much like what could be wrong with me or the baby, but where am I going to be? Where am I going to be stable? And
survival there.
That's totally. It's like root chakra stability stuff. And that's what was going on. And so we spent a couple of really hard months kind of just being not grounded at all. We went back to Oregon. We were staying in our little bus, like a really little bus, and crammed in there with a wood stove, and it started snowing, and it was just hard, just me and Andrew together in that little space, but we learned a lot through it. In the aftermath, I'm like really grateful for the experience that we went through.
Yeah.
And it also gave me this space to dream up different scenarios, because I knew for sure I didn't want to have someone be the boss at my birth. What I didn't know is who I wanted to be there and really how primitive I wanted it to be, because we were used to living quite primitively without running water, without really anything but fire. And I thought that I would be able to do that. And of course, my focus at the time was really geared on the birth, not so much the postpartum, which is like a whole nother world where I really did want to have a lot of comforts. But at the time when we were sort of in this vague zone, we were searching, dreaming up different places that we could go. We knew we wanted to be amongst community and families and support and
at
in a wild place.
At this point, what's your relationship like with your guys' blood families? Are they included in any of this? Are they support? Do they know about your plans? I mean, you obviously have been already living the pretty alternative lifestyle. So how do they fit into this, if at all?
Yeah. My parents, I'm an only child. My parents are really supportive of my lifestyle and very understanding and loving towards me. And when I told them that we were having a baby, I waited until I was about 4 months. And they were just so ecstatic. And truly, I don't remember them ever asking if I was going to see a doctor or anything. I think they're concerned more with like the stability thing, like where you're going to be and all of that. But yeah, they just totally trusted me and trusted birth, I guess. And it somewhat surprises me because they're a bit more conventional and do go to the doctors for, not for every little thing, but like for big things. They definitely trust the medical system. And I do too, to an extent, if it's like emergencies. But
yeah, that's what they're good at.
But I think my parents both trust that birth is natural and that I'm healthy and that I know what I'm doing and making good choices. And yeah, they were supportive. And my partner's parents they were more concerned. They definitely were asking if I was seeing a doctor or if I had a midwife or anything like that. And it took a little bit of reassurance of that we know what we're doing and that we do have support, and it looks a little bit different, but that we do have it. But they're kind of like a phone relationship, right? So because we're far away from both of our parents, so it didn't really have that much influence what my partner's parents thought. You know, my parents loved it. Okay, that's great. That's how I felt about it.
Okay, so keep walking me through the rest of your pregnancy.
Yeah, so somewhere around the end of March, I was just so fed up with not knowing and with being in this bus, and was counseling with my friends over the phone, and just decided to follow like the clear path, which was to go back to California, and that's where I had been living before meeting Andrew, and have a pretty tight community down there, which actually includes a midwife and doulas who are just my friends. That's just what they do is birth. So I had like their support too, just in trusting me and my body and everything. We decided to go back down to California on the coast in Sonoma County and settle down. We rented a little cabin in this garden that I had actually worked in that garden a couple of years and felt pretty connected to the place. And it felt really good to be back with my friends and to be honored. And I was 8 months pregnant at the time. So feeling pretty pregnant.
Yeah.
And just like finally, okay, I'm just going to rest. I'm just going to be here and like soak in all this nice celebration and pampering. And it just felt really right. So the only thing that I did have was some palpitations. My friend Nan, she's a midwife from way back in the day. She doesn't really do that anymore, but she knows a lot, and she's been to a lot of births, and she just offered that to me as like a gift to just kind of check the baby's positioning. So we did that a couple of times. Like I think we did it once a week, and it was more just a fun thing to do with her.
Totally, and that can feel so like nurturing, and to feel, especially someone that knows you and loves you, that's like a whole nother experience.
Oh yeah, I know. That was my big thing with deciding to go back to Sonoma County. It's like, I want to be with my wise women friends.
Hell yeah.
I started to think more so beyond the birth and what the birth could look like into the postpartum, and realizing, okay, I really don't want to be out in the woods with just my partner. That sounds terrible to me in some ways, just because he can't do everything for me, there's too many needs for him to like take care of everything. And I had in my mind already that I'm just going to be in bed afterwards, after the birth, and I want to be in a place where I can just do that freely and be taken care of. So
and for your women to take care of him, how special.
Yeah, definitely. So around 38 weeks, I think, my friend Nan, she did a blessing way for us out in the garden, and all my dear friends came, and it was really special. And Andrew was there too, so he was also being honored, and such an amazing experience to, pass just the prayers and the songs, and then passing the feather around and receiving. It was like such a time of receiving all these prayers and wisdom too from the women in the circle, and such an affirmation to me that they were looking right at me and thinking, like, yeah, you can do this. This is a big life experience for you, and transition into motherhood. This is huge, and you're going to be fine, and you're going to do it. So it was so blessing, that energy, and that happens to be the very same spot where we set up the birth space.
Aww.
That was pretty magical too. Nan is a person who keeps a lot of different ceremonies that she's been passed down by people, and does it in a really good way. So
beautiful.
Yeah,
so
that's awesome.
You set up the birth space right in the space where you received all these blessings. That's so cool.
Yeah, and the birth space was we have a 12-foot teepee. And it's a teepee that Andrew sewed, and he actually gave it to me like the first day I met him. He gave it to me and entrusted me to bring it up to this primitive skill gathering, like set it up, and we ended up just sharing it there, and like getting to know each other. And so it was like a really special teepee that we've carried with us. And so he set that up right there in that ceremony spot under the plum tree, and then my friend lent me the birth pool that she had used, and so we had that inside, and I think he set it up about 2 weeks before she was actually born, so I was just like looking at it all the time.
Totally.
In the garden, very very present. That was kind of cool, and the weeks just kind of went on, and I enjoyed it, and started waddling and feeling really good.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think I was really blessed also that I didn't have really any complications throughout the pregnancy. Like, everything went pretty normally. So I didn't have a whole lot to be concerned about. And
yeah, that was kind of what I was wondering is spiritually or psychologically, how did you feel, particularly towards the end? Was there demons and shadows and fears and concerns to overcome? Were you doing a lot of like self-work, or was it just easy for you to be in the, the bliss and joy of a wild pregnancy?
That's a really good question. I think I did. I think concerns did come up for me, for sure. Not so much about like physically things that could go wrong, but more so about how all of my emotions and everything are impacting my baby before she's born, like in the womb and everything. And that was just a big thing for me. And sometimes I felt really guilty for just having, like anger or just different emotions like that. So that was something that I was working through spiritually, and just trying to remember to be more in that ceremony space all the time. That's something my friend Anne Louise really wanted to encourage me to do when I came back. She's like, you are pregnant. It's a 9-month ceremony. Stay in that and pray and just be with God. And so it's something that I did try to work on more at the end. But as far as like thinking that something was going wrong inside my womb, I don't think I really indulged in that too much. Like, it just felt right. And I felt a lot more connected towards the end. Like, in the middle of the pregnancy, I remember, like reading other people's stories and thinking, oh, gosh, I don't really feel like that connected to my baby. But towards the end, it just did more so. And totally. I think it looks different for everyone else. So that was one of my things about reading other people's stories, is remembering not to compare myself to stories, because we're all so diverse. But yeah, around like 34 weeks, it suddenly hit me that she was a girl. Like, I just knew that I had a little girl inside of me, and that was so special. Just feel like
what week were you?
A little bit more.
When was that you got that information?
That was about 34 weeks, and that was right before we made this journey down to California.
Cool. So yeah. Take me towards when you're entering your birthing time.
Yeah. So we had this space set up, and it was in May. It was such a perfect time to birth. We're in this garden, all the roses are blooming and the different flowers, and it felt so fertile and so perfect, and it's starting to warm up. And yeah, May. So we celebrated our anniversary of knowing each other, of meeting each other, actually. That was really special. And I think it was like the next day or the next few days, it was Mother's Day, and kind of got to be honored like that. Like, that was my last big outing, as I went to the farmer's market, which is kind of the social scene for me out there. And like went and saw Nan, and Nan looked at me, and she looked at Andrew, and she said, "You guys are ready to have that baby. You know, when the father looks ready, that's when she's ready to have the baby." Like, energetically, if the father's not ready, I guess it can influence it. But that was actually after, like, my due date that I calculated myself was May 8th. But intuitively, I had already known that it was going to be on the new moon, which is May 15th that year, or that month. Just because my goats had always given birth on the new moon, and kind of realized that there is something connected there with the moon energy, and just like newness and rebirth and everything. So
for sure. I mean, it's I birthed on the full moon, and there's, it's all anecdotal, who would study that, but there's a ton of stories of women birthing on the new and the full. But of course, right? Like the tides of the ocean, the tides of our amniotic fluid, the tides of the cosmos, like, the pulse of, the lunar energy. Like, of course, it's crazy to not acknowledge the connection there.
Yeah. And funny you say that, 'cause my friend Melissa actually did do research on that and found that it was true. Most women birth on the new moon or the full moon. She did a whole sample of, like, home birth people. So yeah, you're totally right.
It's super common. I remember when I used to doula in hospitals, if the mom was in labor on a full moon, it was like, oh shit, she's probably not gonna be able to get a room, because it's kind of just known that labor and delivery will be going crazy on a full moon. So it's interesting. But anyway, so you had passed May 8th, and Nan says, you guys look ready.
Yeah, that was on Mother's Day, which I think was the 13th or something. So the next day, the 14th, I think the only big thing I really did that day, because I was mostly sleeping, like resting a lot, like sleeping maybe 12 hours or something, and taking naps and just laying around. But the big thing I really wanted to accomplish is, like, okay, Andrew's birthday is the 16th. I just want to make a birthday cake for him and have that ready. So I went. We didn't have an oven. We just had, like, a little camp stove and a fire pit. So I went to my friend Anne Louise's and baked him a cake there. And then she wasn't there, so I just, like, soaked in her bath and just soaked it all in. Enjoyed that evening, and went and picked some roses and some honeysuckle and brought all that yummy stuff home and put it in the cabin. It was, like, such a beautiful fragrance in there. And I went to sleep, and it was like around 1 in the morning, and this was the new moon now, like on the dot. I woke up and started having contractions, like the first real ones. And they weren't like intense or anything, but just clearly I knew, okay, this is happening now. And I think they were about every 20 minutes or something like that. So they were just warm-ups. But I woke up and I was so excited, really, that it was hard to sleep or anything. And I just kind of like observed them and, just I would say curiously, like, observe what was going on each time, because I'd never felt anything like that, of course. But I kept having the sensation that I had to poop. So I went outside because we had like a compost bucket outside of the cabin. And I went out there, but it was really cold outside, and I just felt uncomfortable. Overall kind of uncomfortable. So I got this other little plastic bucket and brought it inside the cabin, thinking that maybe I would just be more comfortable in there, and then I could go back to sleep after I go to the bathroom. And I sat on that, and it actually collapsed under me, and I just like fell backwards on the floor. And this is Andrew's favorite part. I think it's funny that I fell on the floor, and our bed is on the floor. It's just like a wool mattress. But he like jumped up in the air. He just shot straight up in a really protective way.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, what's happening? And then he saw me on the floor. And his first thought was, oh no, there's pee everywhere now. But the bucket was empty, actually. But yeah, and then I told him what was going on, and then he knew, and we just went back to bed, and he kind of held me, and I tried to go back to sleep, and I think I did take some naps in between. I had like a 20-minute window between each wave, and it would wake me up, but it wasn't overpowering or anything. So in the morning, I slept in a long time. Like, Andrew was milking the goats now and doing all the morning chores and feeding the chickens, so I kind of just stayed in bed. And I think in the afternoon, around noon, we took a walk with the goats and the dogs, and I came back and I was so tired, and my focus was really just to nap as much as possible that day, just stay in bed. And I did that. I did a couple of chores, I think, but around dinner time, the waves just started getting really strong, and I was like kneeling over on this box, just breathing through them. Like, I kind of knew it was going to pick up around evening, because I'm pretty tuned into just natural rhythms, natural cycles, and I don't have a light or anything, and I just knew she was going to be born at night. Like, that's the time that this feels right to me. So in the evening, things started to pick up, and I had told my two friends that I invited to the birth, Anne Louise and Maya, and so they came. Maya came first and just kind of sat with us in the room, and the sun was setting, getting dark, and I was just laying in bed, and Andrew was like holding me, and just going through it. But eventually Maya kind of encouraged me to move around more with it. I think I might have ended up just sitting still through most of it if I hadn't have had the encouragement. So that was really sweet. And I just got more active in there, and she got a wood fire going in the stove. It was really cozy space, and Anne Louise showed up with a big chicken dinner for everybody, and I considered staying inside. I was just afraid of being cold out there, and then everyone kind of got in this tizzy of okay, now we have to bring the tub and the pool inside and the propane heater inside and bring everything in, and that just got really chaotic really fast. So I just stepped outside and just went outside and saw the stars and felt how good it was out there, and just decided that I'm going to stick with that plan and just be outdoors. And people were asking me questions and talking to me a little bit more than I really wanted. that's something that I think about when I revisit the birth. It's like, I love these stories of women being totally on their own and just deep in themselves and everything, and like with spirit. And yeah, I so admire that. And when I think about my birth, it wasn't exactly like that, because I had people with me. I had Andrew and my two friends, and I'm so grateful for their companionship. And I ended up kind of relying on their companionship at some point. You know, when the waves got really intense, I loved that Maya could squeeze my hips for me and like touch me, and it felt good to me. So this, you know, is obviously what I needed in this birth, but I think in the future, I would really love to just kind of do it more on my own.
Yeah, me too.
Now that I trust myself. I think it was that, though, that I didn't know how it was going to go, and I wanted to know that I had people there to support me. It just felt more comforting.
Well, it's kind of funny because before we were recording, we were saying how the average person is like, I should birth at the hospital for my first baby if they want home birth. And then there's like layers, right? So then the next person is like, well, I want a home birth, but I'll just have a midwife, if they actually want free birth. And then there's free birth, but I'll have people around. And then there's, you know what? I'm literally just going to be by myself.
It's like the hierarchy of radical birth.
Yeah, totally. Just like walking into the woods without notifying anybody.
I know.
That's funny.
Someday. But yeah, I mean, I did actually have the option to have Nan there, who is a midwife. She's not practicing anymore, but she's delivered or been at probably thousands of births in the past. So I had the option of her being there, and she offered that if I wanted to call her, at transition time, that she would come. And I kept that in my head, like, okay, if there's an emergency or if there's something going on that I can't handle, I'm definitely going to call her. And she's only 15 minutes away. And she had given us that the emergency childbirth handbook. We read that, and then she gave us her oxygen tank just in case we needed that, so we didn't have to call like the firefighters to come if we needed that. But we just had things on hand just to be responsible, I guess.
Okay, now I have to do a PSA about oxygen at births.
Yeah.
Strongly do not recommend for anyone listening. It's a controlled substance for a reason. It's toxic to babies. Babies should not be having oxygen. It's totally insane that midwives are carrying that and acting as if that's some heroic thing. So I'm glad you didn't have to employ that. And yeah, that's kind of crazy.
Yeah, well, thank you for saying that, because I actually felt pretty uncomfortable, and I didn't really want to take it when she offered it, because I don't really even know how to use it.
Exactly.
I've never.
It's like here's some like a
danger.
Right. Here's some like episiotomy scissors, Andrew, like just in case you need them, or here's like a deep suctioning thing for your baby's nose just in case you need them, like.
Right.
I mean,
I guess it was maybe more for me if I needed oxygen, but again, like I've never used one of those contraptions before.
Right. Totally.
So I don't know. It was there.
Yeah.
It was just in a corner somewhere.
Yeah, right. You put a tapestry over it.
Yeah. I think it was out on the deck with some storage things, but she also gave me this great thick rope that she had used before at many births. So I had this great thick rope tied around the crown of the teepee, and that was like the best thing that anyone gave me when it came to bearing down. I'm outside. It's dark. It's starry. It's a new moon night. It's really gorgeous. And we're in the redwoods. This is like a garden in a meadow surrounded by huge redwood trees that just creak at night and kind of silent, like you hear this creaking. Really awesome. And I'm just kneeling on this bench, just kneeling, staying still. It felt really, really good to me, actually. And I did get up a couple times, and, like, move around, and they brought me a sheepskin, so I'm just on a sheepskin out there. And they got, I think Maya got a fire going. There's a little fire pit just kind of close to the teepee, in between the teepee and the cabin. we had a fire going outside, which was really comforting. And, it just like continued to roll on, and they were definitely overpowering. They were definitely painful, the waves, but I was never scared about them or anything. I just trusted that my baby was fine and I was going to be fine. And my concern was really, is this going to take days?
Yeah,
I didn't know how long, because I actually, right, like I had listened to your birth story I think just before that. I can't remember when yours came out in like beginning of May, I think. So that was probably the most recent podcast actually before my birth. And I'm like, oh my gosh, is it going to take days? I don't know. Or my friends can't handle that. They're going to leave me here alone. They're going to be tired. So that I didn't know. And I didn't know. But I just went with it. And I moved around a little bit. I walked around the garden, and I tried hanging on my friends, like hanging on Andrew, and that just didn't really feel good to me. That was an encouragement of Maya's, and like, no, you guys can't really hold all that I am right now, so I'm just gonna be on my own. And I remember like checking a couple times, and I was kneeling, and my mucus plug was coming out. There's like mucus and stuff on my legs, and that was kind of interesting, right? It's like you're in it, but also you can be this observer of like, whoa, my body is like doing this right now. This is so cool. So yeah, I'm just kind of like observing and everything, and just going through it. And then at a certain point, it was probably around 11, I kind of just demanded that the pool be full now. Like, I want to get in the water. And we had borrowed one of those on-demand propane heaters, but that was only doing lukewarm water. It just wasn't really going to cut it. So pretty much, like this conversation right now, like when technology is not working, we just go back to basics and just do it simple. Back to basics. Okay, we have a fire going. Awesome. So Anne-Louise, she got like a pot and a kettle and just was rocking the fire and like heating up water and boiling that for me and taking it to the pool, and just so devoted. And I'm really grateful in a situation like that I had the support I had at my birth of like people doing stuff, taking care of things. So
I mean, that's the best support, right? Like just kind of managing the space so that you can do your work.
Yeah. She gave me some tea, some ginger roast tea. She fed everybody so that they were taken care of also, so that they could be supportive for me. And it wasn't that much longer, maybe an hour, half an hour, I don't know. But then the pool was ready, and so I couldn't wait any longer. I just wanted to get in the water. And when they did, it felt so good. It felt so right to be in there and just like lay down and let it take over my body. And yeah, I had like an altar set up in there with some candles and some stones and bunch of roses. I put like rose petals and lavender in the water and just moved, worked in there for a while and moved around and and it just kind of like in my mind when I'm reliving it, it seems like it happened so fast, and it was just a few hours that night.
Where do you
7 or 8 hours.
Where do you think you are in your birth process at this point of the story?
Well, I think when I got into the water, I was pretty close to transition. Mm-hmm. So when I had woken up at 1 in the morning, it was just, like pre-labor all day long. And around sunset is when active labor really started to kick in, because that's when I just couldn't do anything but breathe through it. And, like the waves were coming pretty quickly too. Like I never timed them, but I could tell in my mind though because I'm pretty good with time, like they were just a couple of minutes apart and getting really strong. So I think around midnight or so when I was in the pool, I was pretty close to transition, and I started hanging from the rope. So I would hold on to it and just like hold all my weight with my arms, and that is the most powerful feeling in the world, probably. Like wow, just feeling your baby moving down in you, it just gives me chills how intense and amazing and like otherworldly that sensation is, just staring down. Like, wow. So that was, yeah. Thank you for that rope. That was really great. And I was in the water at the same time, so it was such an ideal setup. Yeah, I'm like, hold me onto this rope, and I don't really know where I was at the time. I knew I was in labor. I didn't know how close I was or anything. But at a certain point, I was just curious, so I just like checked myself, and I didn't have to do very much. I just like put my fingers in, and I could feel. The first thing I felt was the sac, the amniotic sac, actually. And I knew it was that just because it felt...
Right, it's pretty obvious.
It kind of felt like a goat stomach, right? So
oh, yeah, that's totally what I thought, too, not...
it had that flavor to it, that consistency.
Yeah, that goat flavor.
Yeah, goaty.
That's funny.
But I also felt...
some people say, like, water balloon.
Oh, yeah. Well, if you've ever cut open a goat, their stomachs feel just like an amniotic sac, I guess.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I felt also a little bit of cervix it was hard, and I was just going on intuition with all of this, but like, okay, it's obviously like I'm not fully dilated, but I'm really close. This is amazing. So just checking like that, it kind of like gave me, it gave me a good idea of how close I was, which gave me this whole new wind of, wow, I'm just going to like do this now. I don't have to wait that much longer. Like my baby's coming really soon. So I just worked on that rope, really. I just hung on that rope as much as I could, and then would take a break and kneel down in the water again, and sometimes lay down in the water, and kept bringing hot in to fill it up, so it was like perfect temperature the whole time. Which when I hear other people's water birth stories, that sounds
hard.
Kind of rare that it's ever perfect temperature.
That's hard to achieve. Perfect water the entire
all
time.
You need. Yeah, campfire is the best for that, I think. But yeah, so actually, this is a cool part of the story that around, it was like 12:30, I think. And I'm not sure how I kept track of time this whole time, but I was very coherent. Like, I never had that tripping out kind of experience. And maybe because I was pretty well rested and it didn't take that long, but I was just super aware of myself, but also aware of what was going on at the same time. It was like kind of this omniscience of, yeah, super, super woman thing going on.
Hell yeah.
But I was alone in the teepee now, and it's lit up with candles. But Andrew, he was out at the fire with Maya and Anne Louise, and they started singing this happy birthday song to him because it was his birthday now, and I was alone in the teepee, and this super strong wave came over me, and I was really vocal the whole night, so they heard me. I think everybody on the land heard me.
Yeah, right.
There's also like 5 other people living on the land. But Andrew came in, in the middle of his happy birthday song. He came in to the teepee and he was like kneeling around the pool the whole time and just saying really beautiful things to me, and he loves me and just supporting me in that way, like that I know that he's there with me throughout the process. And I think it was about that same time that I just got up and I kneeled on the pool, like on the opposite side of him, and felt the first, like fetal ejection reflex, the first push. And with that very first push, I felt a pop too. So my water broke in that moment. But it kind of hurt actually, because I think it's because of that bit of hard cervix that I felt. Just like the sac pushing up against that. So that being in my mind, I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm still not fully dilated, but now the water is open, it's popped, and now I'm pushing, or now it feels like I want to push. It's kind of happening. Kind of like, to me, it felt like vomiting, like that vomit sensation, but the other direction, kind of. And
oh yeah, it's like
I
your vagina throwing up.
Yeah, totally. And you can't stop it.
Mm-mm.
But again, this is like one of those moments where my mind is full of all of the information that I've absorbed through my research, through my listening to podcasts and stories. So I'm kind of like thinking about the different scenarios, the different things that could happen, rather than being like fully present in a more like blank kind of state. So yeah, in a way, I think it was good. It was good for me just to be kind of aware of like what could be happening.
Mm-hmm.
But my concern kind of kicked in, and so I thought, okay, I should probably not be pushing it. I'm probably not ready, so I'm going to get out of the pool. And I got out, and I knelt on the earth. I just was on my hands and knees on the cool earth, which felt really good. And but the pushing was coming, and it was kind of undeniable. But I tried to deny it. I tried to just breathe through it for a while, for a couple of pushes. It just felt like moments, really. And it was the hardest part of the whole thing, was trying to not push. Like, wow.
But you
So
just intuitively knew to do that.
I would guess it's maybe intuitive, or maybe it's just, that's what Nan told me, is like, you want to try to not push right away.
Mm-hmm.
You want to try to wait for a while. So I think, I don't know if it was intuition or really just informational, but.
Gotcha. It was in your head.
But I got out. Yeah, just that knowing that last time I checked that there was still some cervix left, that I probably wasn't ready. So, and also hearing your story where you were afraid of your swollen cervix, I'm like, okay, I got to be careful here. So I got out, and I got on the earth, and I breathed through it. And that only lasted a couple of times, so a couple of moments, and then I just, like, it's like when you're trying to not throw up, and then all of a sudden you just do, and it all gushes out, and it feels really good. And it was kind of like that, but I think what I felt was her head, like, entering my birth canal, and it felt amazing. It was like this one moment in the whole birth that was like orgasmic, really. It was amazing, that sensation, and it just confirmed for me, wow, I am ready. This is all good. This is happening. And I just stayed on the earth for just a moment longer, and I thought about just staying there because it felt too good to move, but I knew I wanted to be in the water also. So I climbed back in the pool, and with the next few waves, I was kind of kneeling in the water and also holding on to the rope. So sometimes I would pull myself up with the rope for that, like, bearing down sensation. And I was checking myself too, because her head came down pretty quickly, and so I could feel the pressure, and I was just like holding my hand over my yoni, and it was pretty quick that I could feel her head just like starting to bulge down there, and just feeling with my hand, and it was like, I don't remember any pain at this moment. Like, of course, before all of this, like, it hurt, the waves hurt, but at this point, I think I was just so aware and like vigilant and curious too, and excited that's all I felt, really. It was just like pure excitement and curiosity and no pain. And so I'm just like feeling, and with each wave, her head is like coming, and in it, it crowned like maybe 4 or 5 times before fully crowning. And at this point, Andrew is inside the teepee, and Maya is also, and they're just kind of out standing around the pool. And Louise is outside at the fire, but I didn't really communicate with them at all. They're just there, holding space without really talking to me or asking me what's going on. And it's dark in there too. So in a way, I like kind of was private and kind of was on my own and wasn't really being watched too much. Like, half of me was in the dark. So yeah, her head crowned, and came out, and that was pretty intense feeling too. Like, I did have that ring of fire sensation, and that was really an intense moment. But
yeah, intense is a understatement.
It really is, and that's the other part that I think about when I revisit my birth too, is I was not at all prepared for that sensation.
Mm-hmm. I think it's actually, it's better that we're not prepared.
Oh yeah.
But nothing really, but nothing could prepare you, right? Like everything that we've heard, like everything's been said. It's just that this is stupid, but it's kind of like trying to explain like going to Burning Man or like acid or something. Like you have to just do it. There's really, yeah, it's a ring of fire. Yeah, it's going to burn. Yeah, it's going to feel like the entire universe is going through a portal through your vagina. But like really, you can't even intellectualize that. You just have to have it.
Well, and also my friends, my older friends who were like grandmas and older wise women, they had told me to do the stretching, right? The perineal stretching, and even to have Andrew do it. And I had we talked about it, but it just did not appeal to me in any way to do that. And so I didn't. And I sometimes think, well, maybe I should have. I don't know, but I didn't. I didn't want to. It didn't feel good.
Yeah, you shouldn't have
the
because of what
it was weird.
Exactly. You shouldn't have because it didn't sound appealing. So there, right there, like we're talking about your vagina. But the other thing is that there's no evidence that does anything at all whatsoever. It's totally, I mean, yes, it's anecdotal. Some women think it helps, but I think it's kind of counterproductive because we also have to be careful about what that implies, because that's implying that you need help stretching. It's implying that you have to do something other than exist with the tissue that very much is meant to. Not only is it meant to stretch, but it is also meant to tear if that is what happens. And it's also meant to heal, So I think the whole kind of consciousness around the stretching prenatally, it can be dangerous in the sense of, that leads a woman to think, oh, I need that. Or if I tear and I had done that, then I wouldn't have torn, or I think it kind of contributes to some mythological, things that are not factual.
Totally. Yeah, I agree. I don't think that there really is any evidence for it physically helping or anything like that. And I didn't really think that it would, but the thing that did kind of sway me towards considering that is just practicing to sustain a sensation like that. I think that's really the only benefit that you could get from doing the stretching is just whoa, this is an intense sensation and I can breathe through it. And when I revisit my birth, this is just the one thing that I think about is how intense that sensation was and how I wasn't able to really sustain it very long. And I didn't push. I was just letting my body push the whole time. I never once, forcefully pushed anything. But at that moment where her head was half in, half out, it was just this moment where I kind of see this opportunity to either sustain that intensity or not. And for me, I didn't really, and I just kind of let this push come just to get her head out. Mm-hmm. It was too much for me. And I did tear. And I like what you said about, kind of getting a little bit, I don't know if you said it exactly, but getting a little too heady and feeling guilty and feeling oh, I did this wrong and I tore, I could have done that better. And I have been that way really when I think about my birth is I think about that moment, maybe I could have prevented it. Maybe I could have done something else. And maybe it's just, my body is like this.
But hold on, but in that thought, there's a unspoken implication that tearing is bad or that it shouldn't have happened or that, that there's an implication that if you had done something different, that wouldn't have happened. And underneath that, that's implying that tearing is bad. And so, that's something that is so powerful to bring up because obviously we are all in a culture. We cannot escape, how, just reductive our vaginas have become, in porn and I mean, that they're all supposed to look one way, and they're all supposed to be, look basically like they're 8 years old, and that, and that childbirth is going to absolutely ruin you, and blah, 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 all the stuff that we already know. When in fact, the reality is, yes, childbirth will change you forever in every single way. Yes. And that is fucking awesome. Right. And so, I've never seen a tear, and I've seen quite scary looking tears. I've never seen a tear in a home birth that wasn't sutured, or I'm sorry, that remained unsutured, that didn't heal perfectly, ever. My own included. I mean, mine wasn't gnarly, but it wasn't nothing. It would have certainly been sutured had a midwife, with a needle been near me. And, it wasn't. And I stayed in bed for, 3 weeks, and I kept my legs together. I never applied seaweed or Manuka honey or any of the other techniques. I just, I kept thinking about my cheeks, my mouth. I kept thinking about its mucous membranes. My cheek is the same tissue as my vagina. And when you bite your cheek, you don't go get stitches, and then you're shocked at how quickly it heals. Even if you keep biting it again on accident, once it's kind of inflamed or whatever. And I just kept thinking about that. And, long story short, my vagina healed wonderfully. My tear is not there anymore. It's all good. What would you say about yours? How did you heal?
Well, it is kind of different for me. And I think my body is more of a collagenous kind of a body, where when I get any kind of cut or scar or wound, it scars. It's on my skin. And so, and I totally agree, the whole like appearance and superficial level of a tear, that's not really my concern here. For me, it's just having lived my postpartum experience. It was really hard having a tear. And I kind of think, well, it would have been very different had I not had that to heal, because for me, it took, like, I was in bed for like at least a week, and then after that I was outside just laying on this futon like all day long, and I basically was just laying around for a month, 5 weeks, not doing anything. And I tried really hard to just keep my legs together and like keep clean, and it was kind of my focus besides my baby. It was
totally, me too.
My hair, it was huge. And Nan was super sweet. She would come over and check on me, and just like encourage me and say I'm looking really good, I'm doing really good. And she's the only person, because I have such a close relationship with her, she's like my wise elder woman friend, and she's the only person that I let actually touch my vagina. And it felt fine and everything. But yeah, she was like encouraging me, like, you're doing great. Most people wouldn't, let this heal without getting stitches. I'm proud of you. And it did heal up, but honestly, I'm 4 months postpartum now, and it's only been like a month that it's been fully healed. Like, it took a long time, and just that sensation of like having to, be really careful of how I move my body, which I think is important postpartum, because you're relearning how to use your body, and you're kind of reborn into this mother body, and it's amazing. And it was hard for me to like not be able to squat and not be able to do a lot of positions. And so only the last month, really, I felt like I can move my body again in that way, because it took a really long time for my tear to heal. And that might be kind of uncommon.
No, that's very, very common. Absolutely. Okay. And I think there's a real genius and beauty to tears sometimes, because I wonder if you would have laid around as much if you didn't have to baby it. I wonder, there's so many different things at play, right? Because when we have to tend to our tears, I know for sure if I didn't have that tear, I would have not have been as good about resting and allowing the rest of my body, my pelvic floor, my uterus, everything, like you said, you're coming into a whole new body. And, it's all connected, right? Because the more we rest, even without tears, the more we rest, the better the integrity of our pelvic floor 30 years from now, right? The less likely we're going to have incontinence or prolapses in our 60s, the more time and love and gentleness and slowness we take in those immediate postpartum weeks and months. Anyway, so I totally hear you. I'm not trying to diminish that it was challenging. I totally hear you. And I just think it's such a beautiful topic, because even in that, there's almost a implication that it should have healed faster, right? But why? Like, just like how my whole thing was, my labor should have gone shorter. I'm just like making that up, right? It took the exact time that it took, and it's our stories around it that actually I find to be the most painful, or to cause the most suffering or resistance, right? And all suffering comes from resisting what is, or not accepting what is. Anyway, but I hear you, and I love that you're starting to feel like, whatever the right word would be for you, like whole in your body again, and feeling some real healing in the last month or so.
Yeah. I think you're right too. I mean, it is such a topic, really. And for me, just talking about it now, it takes some courage, because there's some really deeply embedded shame to it, to tearing, like even talking about it. And I'm not sure why that is. I haven't fully unpacked that, but it's there. And so talking about it is a big thing.
Yeah, I think it's called the patriarchy. I think
totally. Yeah.
Right? Like it's our vagina is like, I oh my gosh. So part of my tear, it happened at the V, like the vaginal opening, and a piece of it tore. And day 2 or something, or day 3, I finally looked at it, and there was a little piece of a tear of skin. I didn't really understand what it was, because I was still very swollen, hanging. And I was like, oh my God, I fucked up my vagina. And I had the same feeling you did of, it was like your vagina's throwing up. You can't do anything about it. I was trying really hard to not add any energy on top of it. And then when it was actually the largest part of her head circumference actually coming out, it's uncontrollable. It just happened, and I screamed through it. And so, later I was like, man, I wonder if there was a way I could have not done that. Or, now I've I cried. I mean, on day 3, which probably is not the best day to be looking at your vagina, because that's all your hormones coming in and your milk coming in. It's like the cry day. But I remember crying and telling my husband, like, and again, I mean, I'm embarrassed to even admit this, because I'm such a feminist and I'm such a self-assured person. And I was crying and going, I'm so sorry. Like, the vagina that you utilize is ruined. It's ruined. And obviously he was like, chill out, girl. It's all good. However it is, it's all good. But I did feel a lot of shame around how it looked, and that I felt like I fucked up. And and then I'm happy to say, but it would have been fine if it hadn't. But my vagina just kind of like reabsorbed it. I don't even really understand what happened, but over the next couple weeks, it just like healed. And I don't really know what happened to the hangy piece, but my vagina just like sucked it back up or something, because it's not there anymore. Whereas for other women that I have attended, the ripped part does remain hanging out. And it's our journey to rediscover self-love and recreate our acceptance of our bodies, which is, our vaginas changing is one of 1,000 ways, right? Our boobs, stretch marks, I mean, everything, right? Everything about humans, taking over our bodies for a period of time and then feeding them for a long time changes us. And if we lived in a matriarchy, if we lived in, this utopian vision that we'll never see, then this could all be celebrated in a really big way, instead of it feeling like some destruction of our womanhood.
Yeah, I had really similar feelings, and I'm really grateful that that we're talking about this, and for you sharing your own experience too. And I've just been on the groups online, the Indie Birth and the freebirth group and stuff, and I guess it catches my eye that there are a lot of topics about tearing and how to heal them and all of this. And it's like the focus, like, how can I heal it as fast as possible? And I think it's really important, just what we're talking about now, to bring more dialogue to it, because it really is just more like, how can I heal my whole self, and how can I rest more? And I don't know. It's like it happens for a reason. Like, I'm realizing that there's a reason today.
Yeah, and
for sure.
I would actually just reframe what my experience is of seeing everyone asking all day long questions about tearing isn't how to heal it. I mostly see how to prevent it. And so there's so much in that, there's so much fear and there's so much concern, that's just saying like my vagina is going to get ruined. Everyone's told me, or I had an episiotomy before, and understandably anyone, coming from captivity where they've been violated and, cut and scarred from unnecessary, violence, understandably there's a lot to unpack there about, am I going to need one again, or how am I going to stretch if I've already been cut? That's a whole different topic than what you and I have dealt with since we had our first babies outside of the system. But yeah, that's what I see more than anything is how to prevent it. And so, yeah, I love this conversation because really my experience, my truth, and what I have seen for a very long time. And, my partner Yolanda absolutely would say the same thing, which is that vaginas are meant to stretch and they're meant to tear if they do, and they're meant to heal. All of that happens in the same sentence. They're not, they're not going, you're not going to be left destroyed. That doesn't make any biological sense. That doesn't make any self-protective sense. And the problem is so few women get to experience that because they're all managed, right? So if you tear at all and you're attended, with someone who also, lots of doctors get paid more to suture after the fact, and everyone just wants to do something, right? So I have rarely been to a midwife assisted birth where the midwife said, we could suture you or we could not. You'll heal on your own. I have so rarely heard that from a licensed midwife's mouth. And yet it's absolutely true.
It is. Yeah. Somebody posted one labial wall or two labial walls in a room will always find each other.
Yes.
Right? It always is meant to heal.
Yes, I love that. Yes, they will find each other. They'll find their way back to each other.
It's such a huge fear. And like I said, I didn't have any fear while I was even in transition time. Like, I didn't have any fear except tearing. And I don't know why. It was such a big thing for me. And I think when I revisit my mom's birth, how she birthed me, like she had a routine episiotomy and tore on top of that.
Of course.
And so she had, like, it sounds really brutal when I imagine it. Right?
So, oh my God, yeah. Could you imagine scissors to your perineum? Holy shit.
I know. And it's like the most sensitive part of our body and the most sacred, and it's the portal into the world. And so no wonder we have so much of our attention focused onto that really tender place.
Yeah, it's the gates.
Yeah. And this conversation that's helping me like really bring awareness to that of how much fear we have towards it. Like, we're going to have focused attention towards our vagina, towards our perineum. Like, let's reframe that more as like just more love towards whatever happens there. And like you said, the healing process too. I mean, that's what it is. It is, if you need that, that's what it is. And for me, it turned out to be pretty good. Like, I was really blessed. I was very pampered in my postpartum. Like, my partner wasn't working, so he pretty much did everything for me. He did all the daily chores and also took care of me and made me sit baths and would smudge me and take care of me. And then my friends did like a meal train, so they were bringing me really good food and massaging my feet and everything like that. So I think I just needed to be on my butt or my back and absorb all of that.
Hell yeah.
That pampering.
And literally every new mother does.
Yeah, everyone does.
Everybody.
I mean,
there's no, even if you're a new mother again by your seventh child, like having a baby, it is the time for reverence and love and support and resting and taking it all in. And this is true of for the optimal, health and bonding and attachment of mom and baby, right? If you're up and
Yeah.
enclosed and you're going to Target or you're working on the farm or you're whatever it is, you are not doing full 100% bonding and connectivity, and assessment, right, of your baby. And that really is done best naked in bed with nothing else on your plate. And so few women get that space, but it's not a luxury. It's only a luxury and a privilege because it's not the norm. It
Yeah,
absolutely
it's really not
should be the
optional.
norm. So
Yeah.
I don't, I like talking about tears because I think it's nice to sit with it and reframe it. And I think it's also, I don't know how to say this, like, it's like a part of it, it sounds so Christian. I don't mean it like that. It's like a part of our sacrifice, like to give ourselves to the bigness of birth and to the bigness of walking through, these gates. I don't think we get through unscathed a lot, and that's okay. Like you said, you're someone that like scars or that marks are left. It's like, yes, fuck yeah, that's awesome. That is our body's story, and that is our body's offering, to make this space and to get so big, and to stretch in ways that we're absolutely meant to, but that freaking hurt, and that leave us in a whole new, state. And I think I love it. I love that I tore because I was so freaked out by it. And I was so freaked out the first week about it. And I'm otherwise so self-assured and just so confident. So, I love that I got that, and that I kept reopening it because I was like, I could probably just like make a snack and then I would totally fuck it up again. And I'd be like, oh my God, when are you going to learn? Get your ass in bed. It took a couple rounds.
That happened to me too.
Yeah.
It was such an aggravating experience to feel it open again.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
But I didn't even know that I had torn until a couple of days in because I didn't check or anything until it was all swollen and everything.
Exactly.
I just rested. A few days in, then I felt it, and I asked Andrew to look, and then he told me that I had a little bit. It wasn't bad, and but it was whatever. It was just superficial, but it was pretty big, and then I started to freak out. Like I really had a big freak out time and cried and all this, but what turned it around for me was Nan saying, it's my battle scar. Like, that women, like tribal women, would say that that's my battle scar, and they're proud of it. So, yeah.
Especially when you've had such a positive birth, right? Like sometimes, as we know, women are left with scars from their birth, and it's haunting to them. And so this is another.
Someone else does it to you.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. Totally. I mean, that's really fundamentally the difference, right? So getting to walk through these, just epically powerful, rites of passages and having the experience leave marks on us, if we birth in power, there's so much opportunity to welcome it and reframe it and love it, and grow with it. And yeah, exactly. When it's happening to you, that's a whole nother thing.
I'll just finish the birth story because where we're at now is her head is only halfway out. So we got to get the rest of her out.
Okay. Yeah, we kind of skipped around there. Okay, so her head is halfway out.
Yeah, I'm in the water and it's dark, and her head comes out into my right hand, and that felt so amazing. Just like holding her head fits so perfectly in the palm of my hand, and the next wave, it was so effortless. Just it happened. Like I felt her body twist a little bit, and then she was out. And here's where like I didn't tell anybody where I was at. I just was very like serious and quiet and inward. And then all of a sudden, her little arms are like flapping towards the surface of the water, and she swam up to the top, and that's when everyone saw that she was there, and she wailed. I just picked her up out of the water and held her to me, and she just cried for probably 10 minutes. She really had a big voice, and people came in, said congratulations, and then left. And the dog came in. He was really curious, and but I was afraid that she was getting cold. Right, my instinct was, okay, I gotta get her warm. It's probably 50 degrees outside, so we went back inside into the cabin, and laid on the bed, and she nursed in there. She finally calmed down, and she nursed and then fell asleep into a really sweet, deep sleep. And I ate some of that birthday cake, and yeah, and my friends like sang a welcoming song to her, and um, I waited for the placenta to come. I had a couple of contractions that hurt pretty good, and then they kind of just ended, and I'm just like waiting for the placenta. My daughter, um, she was asleep, and so I laid her down on the bed, and we're still attached by the cord, and I'm just kind of like, she's laying in front of me, and I'm kneeling over a bowl, waiting for this placenta to come out, kind of losing my patience. She was born at 2:15 in the morning, and I just wanted so much to get into bed with her and go to sleep. And I'm like, okay, waiting for this placenta, and I don't know. This is where I feel like maybe if I had just stayed outside, the energy change is maybe what delayed it. I don't know, because it felt very different being outside, very primal to like going indoors. And it took a good while, and Anne left, and then it was just Andrew and Maya in there, and they were a little bit concerned about me because I was bleeding out a lot, like the whole time. Bleeding pretty good. Like I didn't measure it, but maybe 3 cups or something. But
how did you feel though?
Yeah, so I felt lightheaded if I tried to get up, but I realized, hey, I'm like losing a lot of blood. That makes sense that I'd be lightheaded, but I don't feel concerned or alarmed. So this is probably fine. And I just wish this placenta would come out so I could go to bed.
And how many hours are we at now?
Let's see. It took 4 hours for the placenta to come out. So we were all pretty patient throughout that. But yeah, a couple hours in, they were kind of getting a little concerned about me. And I took some like Dong Quai tincture and didn't really do anything. And then they rubbed my belly a little bit, and that really didn't do anything. And just before daybreak, or at daybreak, I decided to go walk around outside, thinking maybe some movement would help me get this placenta out, because like contractions have totally stopped. It's just sitting in there. I'm not bleeding that much anymore, and I feel fine, but I'm ready for this to be done now. So I wrapped my baby up and kind of held her at my belly, and then put a sweater on and walked around the garden again. And finally I just knelt down, and Maya came behind me, and she very gently just pressed on my belly, and I felt the placenta detach and slip out
nice.
and onto the earth, and it was so amazing just to have it out. And like took prints of it and put it in a bowl, washed it up, and brought her inside. And then I finally got to go to bed at sunrise. But yeah, I think that was not something I expected. I definitely didn't think it was going to take that long. But I just want to like share that because it can be normal for it to take a long time. Like I hadn't ever heard of it taking 4 hours, but for me that's what happened.
Totally. And because all birth stories that we hear are managed, nobody managing a birth is going to hang out for 4 hours. That's not, I say nobody, and I'm sure somebody's going, well, my midwife did. So, okay, maybe there is somebody who did, but the vast, vast majority of managed births, they want the placenta out in the hospital, less than 20 minutes, in home, certainly less than an hour. And I would say that it is certainly ideal that, by 45 minutes, it's like getting thought about and, so you're seeing if it could be encouraged. But like with you did that and it wasn't, and you ultimately felt fine. You didn't hemorrhage, you would have known if you were in trouble because you would have had serious signs of shock. And, and that's a good thing to insert here, that hemorrhage is not based on the amount of blood somebody loses. It's based on the amount of blood paired with how that person is feeling. It's how the person responds to the loss of blood that decides if it's a hemorrhage or not, because one person could lose 3 cups and feel fine, just a little woozy like you. Another person could lose 1 cup and fully go into shock, So I think I love your story. I'm so glad you said that, because it is important to talk about. And, I have other stories on this podcast of women, taking many hours. One woman, I think, was 12 hours. And, yeah, I think it definitely happens, and it needs to get normalized, because with managed births, we don't hear that. And because our cultural narratives are only rooted in managed birth, we have actually lost track of what's normal.
Right. Yeah. It's such a broad spectrum of what can be normal too. And I think just the basis is like trust your intuition. Be prepared with supportive people around you who also trust you. But yeah, trust yourself to just check in and say, is this okay? Is it not? And your baby too.
Right. You're going to know if you don't feel...
Yeah.
You're going to know if people say all the time, well, what if I want a free birth, but what if I, bleed out, and then all of a sudden my husband has to make all these decisions, and he has to. I'm like, what are you talking about? Why did he all of a sudden become another person that's managing you? Like, you are going to know if you're not okay. It's not rocket science. Like, it's pretty straightforward. If you do not feel well after birth and you're showing signs of shock, and you are losing blood, that's a problem. That's very, very unlikely to occur in an undisturbed birth. Obviously, right? Like, that's the most hormonally protective way to birth. It's as if nature designed it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, birth is normal. That's it for me. I love learning about birth and hearing stories and researching, and just the bottom line is like, it's just a normal thing to do. It's what we do.
It's just what we do. Well, I love your story. Yeah. I love that you just followed your instincts from the very beginning, and just totally birthed in power, and so unique, and yet also so universal, and just such an awesome story. I could totally see it in my head as you were saying it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for highlighting those important things too. I really learned a lot just sharing this with you.
Nice. That's awesome. All right. Yeah. Take care.
You too.
That's it for today, everyone. Join us next week for another episode of the Free Birth Podcast. Thanks for joining us, and remember, your body, your choice. Lots of love.